All right, let's continue with one of our leading stories today, the visit to South Africa by Ukraine President Volodymyr Zelenskyy. He cut short his trip, though, following severe overnight attacks on his country by Russia. Let's unpack this now with Dr. Oscar van Heerden. He's a senior research fellow for African diplomacy and leadership at the University of Johannesburg. Dr. van Heerden, thanks very much, as always, for joining us here on 405. What do you make of the timing of this visit to South Africa by Zelenskyy, just given the various security risks at play and the clear diplomatic tensions that also play a part here?
Well, Michelle, as you know, that the truth of the matter is, even in a situation of war, the President Zelenskyy still needs to travel a little bit, whether it is to try and garner support for the war effort, or whether it is to engage with various countries and role players to try and bring an end to the war. And I think, among other things, this was one of the reasons why President Zelenskyy accepted the invitation from President Ramaphosa in South Africa, because Ramaphosa was the lead of the African delegation that came to visit Ukraine and the United States to try and see if they can broker peace. So it's an extension of that. It's most unfortunate that even though the president did have a conversation with President Putin, preempting the state visit for Russia to attack the capital, Kiev, while Zelenskyy is here, knowing very well that it would be disruptive. They've certainly succeeded in that. And I think the question there is why Russia would have done that looms large. But this is why the trip has now been cut short.
Yeah, on the issue of garnering support, Dr. van Heerden, how significant would South Africa's role be here, whether it's symbolic or diplomatically, especially considering South Africa's close ties to Russia through BRICS?
Well, actually, it's a very interesting question, because the truth of the matter is that President Ramaphosa is actually in my opinion, one of the only honest brokers and objective brokers that is involved in this situation. If you look at, for example, the Trump administration, Trump is talking peace and telling everyone that they want peace, but at the same time, they're still giving support to the Ukrainian government, to Zelensky's government. Similarly, the European Union and European members are all still wanting the war to continue. They are baiting Putin by saying they want to put boots on the ground. They want a peacekeeping. They want assurances. So both the Europeans and the Americans, when it's in the final analysis, are not honest brokers. And yet Ramaphosa can claim that ground. He has the ear of both Zelenskyy and Putin. He has no direct interests in the conflict. And as a result, I think that both presidents do respect him in that regard.
Even though South Africa and the president has repeatedly insisted that South Africa is non-aligned. I mean, what does this principle of non-alignment mean when you have two warring sides, each pulling for your support?
Well, remember, as the DIRCO has been trying to scream from the rooftops, non-aligned doesn't mean neutral, and neutral doesn't mean that you can't try and resolve a crisis that is negatively impacting on the world markets, but also the continent of Africa. As you know, Ukraine is a very large exporter of grain, and this war is affecting food security in lots of parts of Africa. And this is why South Africa is playing this role, trying to say that there is something that we can do, given our own experience with resolving conflict and tension through dialogue.
You mentioned earlier just the question around why Russia would bomb Ukraine or attack Ukraine, knowing full well that this visit would happen, that the Ukrainian president would be visiting South Africa at the time. I mean, does it cast doubts for you on Moscow's sincerity? Because there were reports that a peace deal between Russia and Ukraine was very close. That was ahead of this visit to South Africa.
Well, remember, as the DIRCO has been trying to scream from the rooftops, non-aligned doesn't mean neutral, and neutral doesn't mean that you can't try and resolve a crisis that is negatively impacting on the world markets, but also the continent of Africa. As you know, Ukraine is a very large exporter of grain, and Michelle, the president invoked our own experience with our negotiations to end apartheid, in which he says that, both parties from both sides didn't come with preconditions. They left preconditions at the door. They came in, and through the negotiations, they came up with red lines, with non-negotiables, with preconditions, and so forth. I do want to say, in terms of your question, in that same experience, one of the things the ANC strongly encouraged was to keep the pressure on the Nationalist Party by mobilizing the mass democratic movement to constantly have protest actions, marches, to make demands, so that whilst they were negotiating, the Nationalist Party and the apartheid regime needed to know that the ANC has the upper hand in terms of the masses. I suspect, in terms of equivalence, Russia is trying to send a similar message that even though Zelensky might be going around the world saying that they want a ceasefire, saying that they are strong, that they want to continue fighting, that actually it is Russia that is holding the upper hand. This is the message, I think, diplomatically, Russia was trying to send to South Africa and to President Zelensky by bombing Kiev at this critical moment.
Well, certainly. Former President Donald Trump has accused Zelensky of prolonging the war, as you know, Dr. van Heerden, by refusing to cede Crimea. How do you interpret Trump's role in shifting diplomacy? What are the implications here, given the kinds of statements being made by the US president?
This is part of the delaying tactics that I've been talking about. For Trump and Trump's administration to talk about Crimea, Crimea has now been under the control and in the possession of Russia for the last 11 years. So Putin is not interested in who is going to recognize or not recognize the grabbing of Crimea. As far as Putin is concerned, it's already part of Russia. I think the issue now is about talking about the Donbass, the Oblast region, in terms of the new territories that has been annexed by Russia, and how are we going to resolve that? Is it going to be part of the negotiations or not? Is Russia insisting on keeping it because of the lay of the land and the front line? Because certainly Russia is winning this war. That's really the issue that needs to be discussed. So for Trump to talk about Crimea is literally taking people back.
Yeah. And with Ukraine reaching out to Africa, Dr. van Heerden, we know how entrenched Russia is on the African continent, but do you see the continent becoming more of a battleground for diplomatic influence in this conflict?
Not only this conflict. Unfortunately, Africa has got a huge youth population. We're already seeing that when the Europeans talk of European and non-European combatants being put in Ukraine, I can assure you they are already talking about young African males, men that are going to be recruited from Africa. This is already happening, where young African men are being sought after to go and fight in distant wars, nothing to do with Africa. So, and then of course there's the issue of minerals. The continent remains rich in minerals, and yet again, the hunger for those minerals from all quarters, Europe, Russia, China, the United States, and so forth, will persist. And then, of course, we have our hotspots, which is also kept alight by proxies. We know, for example, when we look at what's happening in Sudan, that Egypt, as well as the United Arab Emirates, are having a role to play. They've chosen sides, they are arming those sides, and so forth and so on. So Africa is going to remain a pawn within these global issues unless we as Africans begin to get our act together.
And then as an aside, Dr. van Heerden, the South African president saying, as part of his statement about talking to Donald Trump about the peace process in Ukraine, also said, and I quote, "We both agreed to meet soon," this is South Africa and the US, "to address various matters regarding US-SA relations. We also spoke about the need to foster good relations between our two countries. Now, our Washington correspondent tells us that this communique, this discussion that the President of South Africa says happened via telephone, has not been read out at the White House just yet. It is still in the morning there in Washington, so it may well happen, or it may not. But what does this mean for what has become frosty relations between our two nations?
Look, to be honest, I don't think that Trump had any intentions of taking a call from President Ramaphosa or to make a call to President Ramaphosa. The only reason that phone call happened, in my opinion, is because, one, the president invited President Zelenskyy from Ukraine on an official state visit, but more importantly, two, had a telephone conversation with Putin. If for those reasons, I think that the people around Trump said, even though Trump said, I don't want to talk to Ramaphosa, I have nothing to say to him, those are people around him that would have said, well, they are playing a role. Both of those presidents are taking Ramaphosa serious. We strongly advise that you take the call. And I think that's the reason why the call happened with Trump. Of course, it could not necessarily, it would have been remiss, and dare I say, folly for President Ramaphosa to only confine the conversation to the Ukraine-Russia matter when there is also frosty relations between South Africa and the US. And I'm sure that he found time to slip in the fact that there's misconceptions, untruths, and lies being spread about Afrikaners in South Africa, about our domestic legislation and so forth, and that he would want to have a one-on-one conversation with Trump, to which Trump said the obvious, which is, we'll try and find time, we should talk, it's important.
I take it you have doubts that that meeting will ever happen?
Indeed.
Dr. Oscar van Heerden, telling it like it is. Thanks very much indeed for joining us this afternoon to unpack a whole range of issues, including the Ukrainian president's visit to South Africa, which was cut short just earlier today. Dr. van Heerden is a senior research fellow for African diplomacy and leadership at UJ.